Since its inception, Formula One has been full of drama, controversy, and scandal. Here are 7 of F1's biggest controversies. 2005 US Grand Prix. In practice for the 2005 US Grand Prix, Toyota's Ralf Schumacher crashed hard at the banked turn 13 due to a left rear tyre failure. This meant he had to be replaced by the team's test driver Ricardo Zonta for the rest of the weekend. Zonta also suffered a similar crash caused by another left rear tyre failure later in the weekend. These tyre failures were caused by the unusual banking of turn 13 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Michelin, who supplied tyres to Toyota, as well as BAR, McLaren, Red Bull, Renault, Sauber and Williams, said they did not understand why their tyres had failed in this turn. They flew in replacement tyres, but these still had the same problem. Michelin suggested adding a chicane to turn 13 to slow the cars down, as they could not guarantee the safety of their tyres for the race. The FIA denied this request, deeming it a grossly unfair proposition on the Bridgestone teams, who were Minardi, Jordan and Ferrari. The FIA instead suggested that Michelin teams should limit their speed in turn 13 to protect the tyres. In a meeting of all team principals, except Jean Todt of Ferrari, the teams agreed to reject the FIA's proposal of limiting the speed of Michelin runners in turn 13, citing the potential for accidents. They decided that a chicane was the best option. However, when Jean Todt was consulted, he refused to agree to the chicane, meaning it wouldn't be installed because not all teams had agreed. After all options were rejected, including running a non-championship race with the chicane included, it was decided by the Michelin teams that they would complete the formation lap before retiring from the race. This information angered the fans, who were unaware of these plans, and by lap 10 most of the crowd had begun to leave. The race gave Michael Schumacher his only win of the season, with Barrichello in second and Jordan's Thiago Monteiro in third. However, this would not be what the race would be remembered for. 1976 British Grand Prix. The 1976 British Grand Prix was held at Brands Hatch Circuit and was the 9th race of the season. Niki Lauda led the championship coming into the race, and he took pole position, with championship rival and home favourite James Hunt qualifying second. Lauda got a good start and led into turn 1. His Ferrari teammate Clay Regazzoni made a good start also and passed Hunt going into the first corner. The two Ferraris then made contact, causing Regazzoni to spin. Hunt couldn't avoid Regazzoni and clipped the right rear of the Ferrari, throwing his McLaren into the air. The landing was hard and it smashed his front suspension. Due to the debris caused by this crash, the race was red flagged. Hunt saw this and took a shortcut back to the pit lane. It was decided that the race would restart in grid order, as if the first start had never happened. It was also ruled that drivers were not allowed to use their spare car for the restart, meaning damaged cars had to be repaired in order to retake the restart. This effectively ruled Hunt out of the restart because his car would not be ready in the 30 minutes until the restart. This news angered the British crowd, who soon began to chant, "We want Hunt," over and over again. This, along with the delays caused by other teams with damaged cars trying to enter their second cars for the restart, caused discussions between the stewards. This took a lot longer than the 30-minute time frame indicated that the race would be restarted within. Due to this delay, McLaren were able to repair Hunt's original car and get him ready for the restart. In part due to the risk of crowd trouble, the stewards allowed this and Hunt would take the restart from second place on the grid. Lauda once again led into turn 1, with Hunt this time slotting into second. This was the top 2, until Lauda developed a gear shift problem and was caught and passed by James Hunt on lap 45. Hunt then led the rest of the race, crossing the line in first position. After the race, Ferrari protested the result regarding the decision to allow Hunt to take the restart. The stewards deemed that Hunt was still proceeding in a forward direction when the race was stopped, meaning the result stood. Ferrari then went to the FIA, who arranged a tribunal. The tribunal decided to disqualify Hunt because he had received outside assistance, having been pushed before the red flag was out. This decision came over 2 months after the day of the race and handed the win to Niki Lauda. 2002 Austrian Grand Prix. Despite the Austrian Grand Prix only being the 6th round of the 2002 season, Michael Schumacher entered the weekend with a 21-point lead at the top of the championship. It was Rubens Barrichello who would take pole position, with Ferrari teammate Michael Schumacher in third on the grid. In between the Ferraris was Michael's brother Ralf Schumacher in his Williams BMW. At the race start, Barrichello maintained the lead, with teammate Michael Schumacher gaining second. Ralf dropped to fourth, while Heidfeld took third. At the beginning of the second lap, Heidfeld ran wide and lost 2 positions, dropping him to fifth. By lap 10, Barrichello was 1 second ahead of Michael Schumacher, who in turn was 17 seconds ahead of Ralf in third. The 2 Ferraris led the rest of the race, and after the final pit stops, Ferrari team boss Jean Todt ordered Barrichello to allow Schumacher to pass. Initially, Barrichello refused and a radio exchange ensued. Starting the last lap, Barrichello led Schumacher by a second, and coming out of the last corner of the Grand Prix, Barrichello slowed down to allow Schumacher to pass and take the win. Ferrari and Schumacher were then booed by the fans on the podium. 2007 Spygate Scandal. In June 2007, Ferrari filed a formal complaint against Nigel Stepney, leading to a criminal investigation in Italy against one of their own employees. In July of the same year, Ferrari completed their own internal investigations and dismissed Stepney, who was head of team performance development. Ferrari also announced it had taken action against Mike Coughlin, a McLaren engineer who was then also suspended by McLaren. Details from a court hearing stated that Coughlin is alleged to be in possession of 780 pages of Ferrari's technical information, and that his wife is alleged to have taken all of those pages to a photocopying shop in Woking. Ferrari were tipped off by an employee of the photocopying shop who noticed when he was photocopying these pages. This case was dropped by Ferrari because Mr. and Mrs. Coughlin had agreed to disclose all they knew about the case. McLaren then invited the FIA to inspect their car, stating that no Ferrari intellectual property had been incorporated into their car design. The FIA announced that McLaren were in possession of Ferrari intellectual property, but as there was no evidence of it being used on the car, no punishment was given. However, in September of 2007, the FIA announced that it had received new evidence. The new evidence was emails sent between McLaren's Fernando Alonso and test driver Pedro de la Rosa. The subsequent FIA hearing found McLaren guilty, illicitly collecting and holding information from Ferrari to confer a dishonest and fraudulent sporting advantage. Because of this, they were excluded from the 2007 Constructors' Championship and fined $100 million, still today the largest fine in sporting history. 1994 Benetton cheating scandal. One of the major rule changes for the 1994 season was the banning of electronic aids. This included power brakes, traction control, ABS, and active suspension. At the second round of the season in Japan, Senna retired on the opening lap due to a collision. Instead of going back to the paddock, as usual, he watched the rest of the race trackside to see if he could hear anything suspicious from the Benetton team. After the race, he was convinced that Benetton were using traction control. The next allegations came at that year's French Grand Prix. Williams' Hill and Mansell started on the front row, with Schumacher in third. Schumacher jumped both of the Williams at the start, leading into turn 1. On commentary, David Coulthard, who had been replaced by Mansell for this race, remarked that the start reminded him of when traction control was legal. In July 1994, the FIA announced that after they had analysed Benetton's black box from Imola, they found a launch control system, including a highly suspicious trigger system. This investigation showed that launch control system could be turned on by a computer, but only by using a hidden option not appearing on the menu. This was highly suspicious, and Benetton admitted that the system existed. but denied using the system. They claimed it was hidden so it could not be accidentally turned on. The rule stated that using traction control was illegal, but there was no rule against having the software. Because the FIA couldn't prove it had been used, they couldn't take any further action against Benetton. Despite this, many people to this day believe that Benetton was using the illegal software in the 1994 season. 2013 Pirelli tyre controversy. Pirelli introduced new tyres for the 2013 season to try and improve the racing. These tyres were criticised early in the season because of their excessive wear, forcing drivers to manage tyres too much. To rectify this, Pirelli announced they would introduce new tyres for the Canadian Grand Prix. When testing these new tyres, Pirelli worked with Mercedes using their current car. Other teams complained that this would give them a competitive advantage, and the matter was referred to the FIA's International Tribunal. Mercedes were reprimanded and given a ban from the Young Drivers test. After the new tyres were introduced in the Canadian Grand Prix, Pirelli announced there would be no more tyre changes for the rest of the season. At the British Grand Prix, however, multiple drivers suffered punctures, including Lewis Hamilton, who was leading the Grand Prix at the time.
On that occasion. Oh, and there's Lewis Hamilton, and he's got a puncture, a failure, delamination, whatever, on his left rear tyre. It's the second time this weekend we've seen this happen. For whatever reason, Hamilton is now having to limp through the complex, and our race leader, his race undone by a rubber failure.
Half a lap from home as well. So it's in a straight line down the Wellington Straight, and there it goes. And the main carcass comes out like a polo mint. No, there's a lot of debris on the track.
All of these punctures forced Pirelli to introduce an entirely new tyre for the Hungarian Grand Prix and the rest of the season in order to avoid having the same issues at other race circuits. 1985 South African Grand Prix. Controversy surrounding the 1985 South African Grand Prix was not caused by the driving or anything that happened during the Grand Prix. Instead, it was caused by the decision to race there altogether. This was because of South Africa's apartheid system of racial segregation and discrimination against black people. Due to these abhorrent policies, there was international pressure to boycott South Africa, with many international sports doing so decades earlier. In 1985, international pressure to cancel the race was at an all-time high. France encouraged the two French teams, Renault and Ligier, to boycott, while Brazil tried to persuade Ayrton Senna and Nelson Piquet to miss the race. Despite this, the FIA and President Jean-Marie Ballest released this statement. In light of various political demonstrations which have been organised concerning the Grand Prix of Kyalami and personal attacks against Jean-Marie Ballest, the FISA Executive Committee, the governing body of the sport throughout the world, declares that 1. President Jean-Marie Ballest has no personal authority to cancel the Grand Prix at Kyalami. 2. This Grand Prix has been on the Formula 1 World Championship calendar for 22 years. 3. The 1985 calendar and the 16 Grand Prix was published in October 1984. Everybody knew the composition of the calendar and nobody protested about the presence of a Grand Prix in South Africa. 4. The World Championship regulations oblige the FISA to respect the international calendar and the drivers to take part in the 16 Grand Prix. 5. During the plenary conference at which were assembled in Paris on Wednesday 9th of October, the representatives of the 64 member countries of the FISA, several of which are African countries, not one national sporting authority requested the cancellation of the South African Grand Prix. With these pathetic excuses, and Bernie Ecclestone's desire to use this situation to extract more money from the race promoters, the Grand Prix went ahead as planned. That's it for this video, thanks for watching, and if you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe.